Now that we've talked about what communication apprehension is and where it comes from, let's talk about ways that we can help reduce our communication apprehension. So first and foremost, and I'm gonna keep saying this, some nervousness is normal. It is normal to be nervous about giving a public speech. So just go into your speech knowing that it is normal to be nervous and to experience stage fright while you're giving a public speech. What you have to do is channel that nervousness into your speech, into excitement and animation rather than fright. So first and foremost, when we are trying to reduce our communication apprehension, we need to remember that our anxiety will peak right before we give our speech and that it's going to decline as we progress through our speech. This tends to happen within the first minute or so of the speech. We're super nervous when we first stand up, and then once we realize that the audience isn't going to start throwing tomatoes at us or get up out of their seats and attack us, we start to relax a little bit and we kind of get into the groove of our speech. So our anxiety is going to decline as we progress through the speech. If you can make it through that first minute, you can make it through the rest of the speech. In the time leading up to your speech, however, you should try to think positively. And this is going to sound a little hokey, but go with me. So we need to think positively before we go into our speech. In other words, we need to practice positive self-talk rather than negative self-talk. We tend to be really down on ourselves. We tend to tell ourselves that we can't do it, or that we're going to suck, or that the audience is going to think that we're lousy, or whatever the case is. But you need to take those thoughts and turn them into positive ones. You need to think that instead of I'm going to suck, you need to think that I'm going to do my best. Instead of the audience is going to think that I'm lousy, you need to think that the audience is there to root me on. So we're going to practice this week turning our negative self-talk into positive self-talk. So more on this later. Next, prepare, prepare, prepare. This is really the number one thing that you can do to reduce your communication apprehension. As I was talking about earlier, uncertainty makes for greater anxiety. The more uncertain we are, the more nervous we're going to be. And so every speaker should prepare for as many unknowns as they possibly can, so that if something pops up, you're ready to go. You're ready to attack that problem head on while you're giving your speech. In addition to these, you need to make sure that you're analyzing your audience. You need to keep your audience in mind at every single stage of your speech. But remember that the audience that we remember in our minds is almost always going to be more threatening than the reality of the people who are sitting in front of you. So you might try asking your audience a rhetorical question, or asking for a show of hands, or sharing some kind of story that they're going to relate to make sure that you get your audience on your side as early as possible. In addition, as you're preparing your speech, you want to make sure that you are clearly organizing your ideas. If you are a prepared speaker, it means that you know what the main points of your message are, and you know what points of support that you have as well. So you want to have a really clear outline of what it is that you're going to do, and having that outline is going to help you feel less anxious. You don't want to react to this stress by writing out your entire speech and trying to memorize it, because as we've talked about, that's a bad idea. So preparing a simple outline and having a clear organization of your ideas is really going to help you reduce your overall speech anxiety. In addition to all of these, you want to make sure that you are adapting a conversational tone throughout your speech. Your speech anxiety is going to be a lot more manageable if you act like you're just having a conversation with friends, your audience, rather than delivering a formal speech. So don't be afraid to be a little bit personal with your audience and build in those rhetorical questions, like I said, into your speech to kind of help bring your audience in to this one-way conversation. If you can, you want to make sure that you practice in similar conditions to those which you will be speaking in. At the very least, you want to practice to at least one live human before you give your speech. And if you have things like visual aids, test them out in the classroom beforehand to make sure that they are going to work. Because again, this reduces the amounts of unknowns. You know going in that everything's going to go according to plan, so that's one less thing to worry about during your speech. And finally, this is kind of an odd duck, but you need to watch what you eat before you give your speech. A common feeling when you're giving a speech is those butterflies in your stomach. And this is even more noticeable if you have skipped a meal. So make sure that you eat something good before you come to the speech. And also eat something that isn't going to upset your stomach. So no spicy foods, nothing along those lines. And you also want to avoid caffeinated drinks because that can make things like shaking hands even more noticeable. So especially if you're speaking first thing in the morning, make sure that you have breakfast, those sorts of things. So what you eat can actually have a really big impact on how much nervousness you feel, believe it or not. Next, let's talk about a couple more ways to reduce nervousness while you are giving your speech.